first seen in Her Voyage magazine, now a full audio experience. Love in Transit, the story of how one journey led to the last, most important stop. The air in Pretoria was alive with anticipation, mingled with the faint scent of freshly polished wood and the lingering sweetness of blooming jacaranda trees. The Rovos rail, a vision of vintage opulence, gleamed under the golden South African sun. Its deep green carriages, trimmed with brass and gold, exuded timeless luxury. The scene was bustling with porters in crisp uniforms, guests clutching cameras and champagne flutes, and soft, excited chatter. Amelia Blake adjusted the strap of her leather tote bag as she stepped onto the platform. At 5 feet 7 inches with a striking figure that demanded attention, she didn't need to try to turn heads. Her long braids cascaded over her shoulders, adorned with copper cuffs that glinted in the sunlight. Dressed in a tailored white linen jumpsuit that accentuated her curves, she exuded sophistication and a subtle daring. Her brown skin glowed against the light, her big, expressive eyes scanning the crowd. As her gaze wandered, it landed on him. He stood tall, effortlessly commanding the space around him. Dressed in a well-fitted navy blazer, white shirt open at the collar and tailored trousers, he radiated the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to admiration. His jet-black hair was swept back with precision, framing a face that could have been sculpted from marble-sharp cheekbones, a strong jawline, and a slight shadow of stubble that hinted at a rugged edge. His wire-rimmed glasses added a scholarly charm, but it was his smile, dazzling and boyish, that stopped her breath. Their eyes met, and for a split second, the chaos of the station melted away. His gaze was piercing, as if he could see beyond her polished exterior, straight to the core of her. Her lips curved into a tentative smile, and he responded in kind, his mouth softening with something that felt like recognition. Before the moment could deepen, a woman's voice broke the spell. "Luca, don't forget my bag!" Amelia's heart thudded back to life as a slender brunette approached him, throwing an arm around his shoulder. She was dressed in an elegant floral dress, her sun hat tilted jauntily as she spoke in rapid Italian. Luca's lips quirked into a grin as he reached down to pick up her luggage, his attention momentarily diverted. Amelia exhaled slowly, adjusting the strap of her tote again as she turned toward the grand announcement being made at the platform's edge. A man in a tailored suit, the owner of Rovos Rail, stood on a makeshift podium. Behind him, the train loomed like a promise of adventure. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Pride of Africa," he declared, his voice rich and melodic. "This train is not merely a mode of transport. It is a journey through time, through the soul of this great continent." Amelia moved closer, drawn to the man's words and the magnetic pull of the train itself. The faint scent of leather and cedar wafted from the carriages. Inside, she imagined the plush velvet seats, the polished mahogany table set with crystal glasses, and the vintage lamps that cast a warm glow reminiscent of another era. As she entered inside the train, Amelia ran her fingers over the smooth, wood-paneled walls of her compartment, the subtle fragrance of lilies mingling with the faint metallic hum of the train. She sighed and shook her head, trying to shake off the image of him. She knew nothing about the man, except that he had a woman, who was probably counting her blessings to have him at her side. "How lucky she must be," Amelia muttered to herself, a bittersweet smile playing on her lips. "And here I am, on the solo adventure of a lifetime, thinking about a stranger." The gentle lurch of the train brought her back to reality. She turned to the window, watching as Pretoria's bustling platform faded into a blur of golden hues, dotted with trees and small towns. South Africa was calling, and with it came the promise of discovery, of stepping out of her routine and into something new. The room was smaller than she expected, a cozy single she had booked by mistake instead of the double she initially wanted. She laughed, thinking, well, at least I won't have to share the mirror. She threw herself onto the plush bed, spreading her arms out wide. I could be naked if I wanted, she mused with a grin. The thought made her giggle, a sound that echoed softly in the quiet room. A soft rhythm began to rise in the distant drums, steady and enchanting. Amelia glanced at her watch. 6:30. Dinner was being announced in the most dramatic Rovos Railway. The ceremonial drumming resonated through the train like an ancient call to gather. Amelia stretched lazily before hopping up to prepare. In the compact but luxurious bathroom, she let the warm water of the shower wash away her fatigue. After toweling off, she reached for her yellow dress, its satin fabric shimmering like sunlight. Paired with sleek black heels and her favorite gold earrings, she felt every bit the radiant queen she wanted to be tonight. Her braids, freshly moisturized and styled, cascaded over her shoulders. She leaned into the mirror, carefully applying her makeup just enough to highlight her striking eyes and full lips. A spritz of her signature perfume added the finishing touch. Amelia stepped back from the mirror, smiling at her reflection. She mimicked the voice of the Rovos rail owner from earlier, waving her hand regally. No cell phones, official dinner attire, she winked at herself. Guess we're here to create memories, not take pictures. Satisfied, she grabbed her small clutch and stepped out of her room. The hallways were alive with faint murmurs of fellow passengers and the sound of soft piano notes floating from the dining car. Amelia felt her heart quicken, not just at the idea of the lavish meal awaiting her, but the possibility of crossing paths with him again. As she entered the dining car, the opulence was intoxicating. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over tables set with fine china and polished silver. Guests were already seated, their laughter and chatter blending harmoniously with the clink of glasses, and there he was, Luca, seated at a table near the window, his dark eyes flicked upward, catching hers. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. His lips curved into that devastating smile once more, and Amelia felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Taking a steadying breath, she smiled back and walked toward her assigned table. Tonight was just beginning, and so, perhaps, was something else entirely. After the exquisite three-course meal paired with wines that tasted like bottled African sunsets, the Pride of Africa train kept its rhythm rolling steadily through the night, as Amelia's heart and Luca's soul danced to the melody of Perfect Strangers. The dining car buzzed with soft conversations and the occasional burst of laughter. Luca's sister Sophia, animated and exuberant, spoke to him in rapid Italian, her hands moving as though she were painting the air with her words. Luca nodded along, his attention seemingly devoted to her, but every so often his gaze would wander, searching until it found Amelia. Seated across the room, Amelia pretended not to notice, but her last sip of wine felt heavier than the others, weighted by the heat of his glances. As she placed her empty glass down, she stood with deliberate calmness, excused herself politely, and walked back to her room, her steps slow but purposeful. Inside her compartment, she exhaled deeply and smiled to herself. She reached for her diary, the leather soft and familiar in her hands, and began writing. Her pen moved tenderly across the page as she described him, the man she'd just met, the man who seemed to have rooted himself somewhere between her mind and her heart. She read over the words, chuckling softly before pressing her fingers to the page as if to seal her feelings within. After brushing her teeth, she slipped into her soft cotton pajamas and lay down, letting the gentle swaying of the train lull her into sleep beneath Africa's starlit sky. By dawn, a cool breeze whispered through the small gap in her window, waking her softly. She stirred, glancing at the clock, 6 a.m. Deciding that the promise of coffee was too tempting to resist, She rolled out of bed, slipped on her robe, and made her way to the lounge area. The air was still, the car faintly illuminated by the early morning light. As she entered, she froze. There he was, Luca, standing by the coffee station, holding 2 steaming cups in his hands. Luca's face lit up when he saw her, his smile as warm as the coffee he was holding. Before she could even manage a good morning, he blurted, "Which car are you in?" Caught off guard, Amelia laughed softly, her voice still husky from sleep. "Good morning, stranger," he chuckled, shaking his head. "Good morning, perfect stranger." They giggled together, the sound breaking the quiet of the lounge in a way that felt oddly intimate. "I'm in the car just after the cafe," she said, pointing down the corridor. "And you?" "After yours," he replied, his eyes sparkling. They stood there, smiling at each other, the silence stretching just enough to feel significant. 30 seconds passed before they both broke into laughter again. "You better go before the coffee gets cold," Amelia teased, nodding toward the cups in his hands. Luca glanced down at them and smiled. "Yep, and she's... oh, sorry, see you round." He turned to leave, his steps light, his grin lingering like a promise. Amelia stood there for a moment, biting her lip, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks as she watched him disappear into the corridor. Her morning had just started, and already the day held a spark of something extraordinary. Amelia wasn't in the mood for the dining car that morning. Instead, she opted for a granola bar from her bag and the coffee she'd managed to snag earlier. Sitting by the window, her laptop balanced on her knees. She opened her inbox to find an email from her boss in Washington, D.C. Work was a constant companion even on this luxury escape. She sighed, replying quickly while the train hummed along the tracks. Time slipped by unnoticed. By the time she glanced at the clock, it was nearing lunch. She jumped up, taking a quick shower before slipping into a red jumpsuit that clung to her curves in all the right places. A pair of chic flat shoes completed the look, and with her signature red lipstick and oversized black sunglasses, she could have been mistaken for a model straight off the pages of a glamour magazine. As she stepped into the train's aisle, Amelia walked with effortless grace, each step echoing like a catwalk strut. She felt the presence of someone behind her, the soft rhythm of footsteps matching hers, but she didn't turn around. Behind her was Luca, utterly captivated. Each sway of her hips, each confident stride, felt like an unspoken invitation to a private dance that only he could see. She was mesmerizing, and Luca couldn't look away, his thoughts a blur of admiration and longing. Amelia entered the dining car and took a seat at one of the elegantly set tables. Moments later, Luca appeared, pulling out the chair next to hers with a charming smile. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice warm and teasing. Amelia looked up, her lips curling into a smirk. She gestured toward the chair with a graceful hand, her smile all the invitation Luca needed. "Perfect stranger," he began, leaning slightly toward her. "What's your name?" Amelia laughed softly, shaking his outstretched hand. "I think I'll keep the perfect stranger title. It suits us, don't you think?" Luca nodded, his grin widening. "All right, perfect stranger. Nice to officially meet you." The waitress appeared, and they ordered their meals. The conversation flowed as if they'd known each other for years. They talked about everything and nothing, travel dreams, embarrassing stories, favorite meals, but neither asked the obvious questions, phone numbers, relationship status, or even last names. It felt unnecessary, as though naming their connection might break the spell. Time passed too quickly, and before they knew it, the train began to slow for the first ground tour, a safari. As Amelia stood to leave, she caught sight of Sophia approaching from the opposite direction. Not wanting to create an awkward situation, she smiled politely and excused herself. "It was wonderful talking to you, perfect stranger," she said, grabbing her bag. "I need to go change for the safari tour." Luca stood as well, his gaze following her every move. "See you then," he said, his voice filled with anticipation. As Amelia walked away, Luca watched her disappear down the corridor, already counting the moments until their paths crossed again. The air between them was charged, the promise of something undeniable hanging just out of reach. Sophia walked up to him, placing 2 fingers under his chin to close his slightly ajar mouth. "Dude, you're literally dropping your face. She's gone." Her tone was sharp, but her smirk betrayed her amusement. "Please, not again. You promised me this trip is supposed to be just us. I hate when you start doing this," she added, pointing at him with an exaggerated flourish. "We've never had a proper brother-sister getaway without you falling in love with a stranger," Luca chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Oh, come on, Soph. That's not true." Sophia arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. "How about Spain? Ring any bells, Lupe?" Luca sighed dramatically. "Spain doesn't count." "It so counts," she shot back, collapsing into her seat and eyeing the extra glass of wine he had yet to finish. "You didn't even remember her name after that whirlwind romance." They both laughed, but the train slowed to a stop, signaling their arrival for the ground tour. Sophia handed him her bag. "Carry this for me," she said, smiling sweetly. Luca frowned. "Do I have to?" "What is it with you and these heavy handbags?" She grinned. "Because when girls see you holding my bag, they'll assume I'm your girlfriend. Consider it a repellent for your habit of falling for strangers. It's for your own good." Luca groaned, but slung the bag over his shoulder, muttering, "If you weren't my sister." As they disembarked, tourists bustled around, eagerly finding their assigned vehicles for the game drive. Luca glanced around, but didn't see Amelia. He mumbled an excuse and ducked into the restroom. The air was fresh, carrying the faint mineral scent of warm baths. Bella Bella, a town famous for its hot springs. Luca's sister, impatient as ever, climbed into their car and saved him a seat. She glanced up, realizing he was nowhere in sight. When she finally spotted him emerging from the restroom, he was too far away to stop the inevitable. Another passenger was about to take his saved seat. Luca spotted Amelia heading toward a different car and quickly waved to his sister, gesturing he'd ride elsewhere. Sophia rolled her eyes. "Unbelievable," she muttered as the driver started the engine. Meanwhile, Luca slipped into the car with Amelia. Coincidentally, or perhaps by fate, the couple assigned to join them had cancelled last minute, leaving them alone. Amelia noticed his sister's bag still slung over his shoulder and burst into laughter. "I love your handbag!" Luca laughed, shaking his head. Women, always making things complicated. She tilted her head. "What's really complicated is why you're carrying it in the first place." "Forget the bag," he said, brushing it aside. "What made you take this trip solo?" Amelia chuckled. "If that's your way of asking if I'm single, the answer is yes." Luca's eyes lit up mischievously. "Are you sure?" Before he could finish his thought, Amelia leaned in and kissed him. It was quick but confident, leaving Luca utterly breathless. His heart pounded like the drumbeat signaling a Maasai celebration. Amelia pulled back, a teasing grin playing on her lips. "Oops, did I just pull a Me Too moment on you?" Luca shook his head, leaning closer this time, and kissed her. This time, the kiss lingered, their connection deepening with each passing second. The driver's abrupt swerve into a pothole jolted them apart, their gazes darting to the rearview mirror, where the driver's poorly hidden smirk confirmed he'd seen everything. They both sat back, flustered but grinning. As they neared the other vehicles, Amelia caught sight of Sophia. Guilt flickered across her face, and she turned to look out the window. Luca leaned in close, his breath tickling her ear. "This isn't over." Amelia laughed softly, shaking her head. "We'll see, perfect stranger." For now, they let the moment pass, enjoying the wild beauty of the African landscape and the promise of what was yet to come. After the safari tour, the train continued its journey, winding through the darkened African landscape. After the safari tour, most passengers retreated to their compartments, exhausted from the day's adventures. The rhythmic hum of the rails lulled them into a quiet reprieve. Amelia, however, was filled with a renewed energy. Dinner was calling, and she was determined to make an unforgettable impression. She chose her best dress for the occasion, a long flowing gown in a stunning periwinkle hue that clung to her curves in all the right places. The neckline offered a teasing glimpse of her décolletage, a subtle yet provocative invitation. She pinned her braids into an elegant updo, her face glowing with the soft shimmer of expertly applied makeup. Her black Christian Louboutin heels, with their signature red soles, were her finishing touch, a statement of power and allure. When she entered the dining car, the effect was immediate. Conversations paused, heads turned, and all eyes were drawn to her. But for Luca, time stopped entirely. He watched her from the moment she stepped in, unable to tear his gaze away. She was radiant, her presence commanding every flicker of the candlelight. Sophia, seated beside him, was chatting animatedly, but her words were lost to him. His mind was elsewhere, spinning fantasies of how he might seize a moment with Amelia, away from the eyes of others. Dinner was a luxurious affair, with courses paired expertly with fine South African wines. The dim lighting, the clinking of glasses, and the soft murmur of conversation created a perfect backdrop for longing glances and stolen smiles. As people began to return to their rooms, the candlelight dimming with each departing guest, Amelia rose gracefully from her seat. Her movements were deliberate, her hips swaying ever so slightly as she walked past Luca, heading toward her compartment. He watched her leave, his heart racing, the primal pull toward her growing stronger with every second. After ensuring his sister was comfortably tucked into bed, lulled to sleep by wine and the gentle sway of the train, Luca slipped out of the room. His pulse quickened as he made his way through the train cars, knocking softly on doors under the pretense of searching for someone's lost watch. When he finally reached her door and knocked, it opened almost instantly. Amelia stood there, her lips slightly parted as if she had been waiting for him. Without a word, she grabbed his hand, pulled him inside, and shut the door. Their eyes locked, and the tension between them snapped. Amelia leaned in, her lips capturing his in a kiss that was both tender and fiery. Luca responded eagerly, his hands finding her waist and pulling her closer. The train rocked gently as they moved together, the motion mirroring their rhythm. Amelia's fingers worked at the buttons of Luca's shirt, her touch sending shivers down his spine. He slid the straps of her dress from her shoulders, the fabric pooling at her feet, revealing her luminous skin beneath. The air was thick with desire, their breaths mingling as they explored each other. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word was electric. The sounds of the train, the hum of the engine, the occasional whistle faded into the background. The only reality was each other. Luca's lips traced a path down her neck, his hands roaming her curves with reverence. Amelia's fingers tangled in his hair, her head falling back as she surrendered to the moment. The world outside the window was a blur, the African sky scattered with stars bearing silent witness to their passion. Hours passed as they lost themselves in one another, their connection as deep and endless as the landscapes rushing by. When they finally lay entwined, their breathing steadying in unison, the train's rhythm sang them into a peaceful slumber. Above them, the sky glittered, the Southern Cross shining brightly, a celestial nod to a love that was as fleeting as it was unforgettable. Amelia lay wrapped in the soft sheets of her cabin, her breathing steady, her body relaxed from the intensity of the night. The rhythmic hum of the train blended with her serene slumber. Luca sat at the edge of the bed, gazing at her peaceful face. The night had been nothing short of magical passion intertwining with tenderness, their bodies moving in perfect harmony under the vast African sky. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She murmured softly in her sleep, and Luca smiled, his heart swelling with an emotion he wasn't sure he could name. He wanted to freeze time, to stay in this moment forever. But forever wasn't theirs to claim. Quietly, he dressed, the reality of their separate paths creeping back into his mind. Before leaving, he found a piece of paper on the desk. With the train swaying gently beneath him, he wrote, "Dear perfect stranger." This night, time folded in on itself, and within those fleeting hours we lived 1,000 lifetimes. The world outside disappeared, and in its place you became my universe. You've left an indelible mark on my soul, one I never sought but now cannot imagine living without. I came on this journey expecting landscapes and solitude, but instead I found you a force I can neither name nor resist. As I write, the memory of you lingers like the final notes of a beautiful song, bittersweet and endless. My heart feels both impossibly full and achingly hollow. How cruel that something so profound can slip through the fingers of time. But if fate should ever bring you to Florence, know that I am waiting. Find me at Via della Vita, number 8, a street that translates to the way of life, fitting as you've become mine. Folded the note and carefully slipped it into her handbag. As he lingered by the door, he whispered, "Goodbye, perfect stranger," and left. Back in his room, Luca found his sister still fast asleep. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Amelia, the touch of her hand, the way her laughter lit up the room, the way she looked at him as if she'd known him for a lifetime. But as the train continued its journey, another memory crept in, his father's laughter, his deep voice, the way he'd always known the right thing to say. The tears came before Luca could stop them. He pressed a hand over his mouth to stifle the sobs, his body shaking. This trip had always been about his father, about honoring a man who had given him and his sister everything. And now, here he was, caught between the past and the future, between duty and desire. Sophia woke to the muted hum of the train gliding along its tracks, the world outside bathed in a soft golden light. The first rays of morning spilled through the window, painting Luca in a glow that softened the weariness etched on his face. He sat quietly, his gaze fixed on the endless plains of the savannah, his eyes rimmed with the red of sleepless nights and unspoken sorrow. Without a word, she slid beside him, her presence a silent comfort. Resting her head on his shoulder, she whispered, "I miss him." Luca turned to her, his voice low and rough, as if the words themselves carried weight. "Me too." Their eyes met, a mirror of pain and love shared between siblings who had lost the man who had shaped their lives. Without hesitation, Sophia wrapped her arms around him, her tears spilling freely. Luca held her close, his own silent grief flowing between them like a river. "This journey," she began, her voice trembling, "it's to lay him to rest, but it feels so much heavier than that." "It's because it's not just about saying goodbye," Luca replied. "It's about holding on to everything he was and everything he taught us to be." Sophia shook her head. "I don't think I can go to breakfast or lunch. I can't face the world today." Luca nodded, his agreement unspoken but clear. He reached for his laptop, opening a folder that had been untouched for months. The screen flickered to life, revealing a home video. The two of them as children running barefoot across their father's garden, laughter ringing out like music. Their father's deep, warm voice called to them, his arms outstretched in a gesture of love so profound it transcended the screen. They sat together, the rhythmic sway of the train a gentle backdrop to their morning. They laughed softly at the silly moments their father had captured, the joy of those days momentarily replacing the ache in their hearts. Then they cried again, their tears falling in sync with the rain that had begun to tap gently against the window, as though the world wept with them. The train moved steadily onward, carrying them closer to Victoria Falls and the place where they would say their final goodbye. But in that morning, wrapped in memories, in each other's presence, and in the love their father had left behind, they found something unexpected, not closure, but peace. A quiet understanding that though their father's journey on earth had ended, his legacy was alive in their laughter, their tears, and the bond that would never break. And as the train cut through the golden landscape, the two of them sat in that cabin, letting the past heal their wounds and the present prepare them for what lay ahead. Victoria Falls. The train came to a smooth halt at Victoria Falls, its final destination. Outside the grand windows, mist rose like a ghostly veil from the thundering cascade. Passengers eagerly stepped down, cameras and curiosity in hand, drawn by the magnetic pull of the majestic wonder ahead. For Luca and Sofia, however, this was no ordinary journey. They stood together at the edge of the falls, the roaring waters echoing the storm of emotions within them. The spray kissed their faces, mingling with tears neither had the strength to hide. Sofia held the urn close to her chest, her fingers trembling. She turned to Luca, her voice barely audible over the relentless rush of the falls. "Do you think he'd be proud of us?" Luca's jaw tightened as he swallowed the lump in his throat. "He'd be proud of you," he said, his voice breaking. "You've kept us together, Soph. Through everything." Together they unscrewed the urn's lid, their hands steadying each other as they prepared for the final goodbye. The ashes danced on the wind before merging with the mist, becoming one with the falls that seemed to roar louder as if to welcome their father home. Sofia collapsed into Luca's arms, her grief spilling out in sobs that racked her body. He held her tightly, whispering words of comfort, though his own tears fell freely, carving silent paths down his face. In that moment, their bond as siblings was unshakable, a lifeline in a sea of loss. From a distance, Amelia arrived, her heart caught in a tangle of emotions. She had told herself she wanted to see the falls, but the pull to find Luca had been stronger. Her steps faltered as she saw them. Luca and Sofia locked in an embrace, tears flowing unchecked. A wave of guilt swept over her, a sharp, suffocating pang that settled heavily in her chest. "I slept with a married man," she thought, shame washing over her like the mist from the falls. Her gaze darted to Sofia, the way Luca held her, the intimacy of their shared grief. It could only mean one thing. "That's his wife," she whispered to herself, her throat tightening. She turned away, unable to bear the sight, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She felt shame, yes, but also something deeper, something raw. The connection she had felt with Luca the night before wasn't just physical. It had reached into her very soul, pulling something alive and vulnerable to the surface. Amelia quickened her steps, her resolve hardening with each one. She found the first boat heading back toward the train station, her body trembling as though trying to shake off the memory of his touch, his voice, his presence. Her mind screamed at her to flee, to put distance between herself and a love that could only bring ruin. Yet her heart clung stubbornly to the moments they had shared, moments that had felt more real than anything she had known in years. As the boat pulled away, she looked back one last time, the falls fading into the horizon. Her chest ached with the weight of her decision, and her soul whispered a quiet goodbye to the man who had unknowingly awakened it. The taxi bounced gently over the cobblestone streets, carrying Amelia away from the station, the faint roar of Victoria Falls still echoing in her ears. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass window, watching the vibrant landscape blur past. Her heart was heavy, each beat an ache she couldn't shake. She had made up her mind. She couldn't face Luca again, not after what she'd seen. The memory of his arms wrapped protectively around another woman, his tears falling freely, played on a loop in her mind. She had felt something profound with him, something she didn't know was possible. But now, that connection felt like an illusion, tainted by misunderstanding and guilt. "Where to, miss?" the taxi driver asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "The airport," she said softly, her voice fragile, as if even speaking might crack her resolve. Back at the station, Luca looking around, his body and mind still raw from the emotions of the morning. He glanced around the platform, expecting to find her waiting, her warm smile lighting up the chaos around them. But she wasn't there. A small knot of worry tightened in his chest. He walked briskly through the crowd, scanning every face, looking for her. As the minutes passed and the platform began to empty, unease turned to panic. He approached a porter, his voice tight. "Have you seen the woman has black braids hair wearing a light blue scarf?" The porter frowned in thought before shaking his head. "Not sure, but maybe the tour guide can help." Luca turned quickly, finding the guide who had been with their group. "A woman I was with yesterday, did you see where she went?" The guide nodded sympathetically. "She took a taxi not long ago, seemed in a rush, asked to be taken to the airport." "The airport?" Luca's heart sank. "Did she say anything? Leave a message?" "No, she didn't say much," the guide replied. "She looked sad." Luca stood there, stunned, the world spinning around him. He felt an unbearable weight settle in his chest, a sense of loss he couldn't put into words. She was leaving, slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop her. His mind raced. Who was she really? He knew the curve of her smile, the way her laughter warmed the air around them, the softness of her touch, but he didn't know her name. He didn't know her story, where she was going, or why she had left without a word. He sank onto a nearby bench, staring out at the horizon where the taxi had disappeared. The vibrant hum of the station dulled, and the lively chatter of passengers faded into an unbearable silence. In the distance, the faint sound of Victoria Falls echoed, a reminder of the journey that had brought them together and now the one tearing them apart. Luca closed his eyes, his head in his hands. The chances of finding her again in a world so vast seemed impossible, yet deep within, a flicker of hope refused to be extinguished. He wouldn't let her memory slip away, even if she was already gone. Amelia sat by the window, the hum of the plane a dull roar in her ears. Below, the vast expanse of the Atlantic shimmered like liquid silver, endless and indifferent. She rested her forehead against the cool glass, trying to silence the storm in her heart. As she reached into her bag, searching for her journal, her fingers brushed against something unfamiliar paper, folded neatly, as if placed there with care. Her breath hitched. She pulled it out, her hands trembling as she assumed this would be perfect stranger's handwriting. For a moment, she stared at the note, afraid to open it, as if the words inside could undo her fragile composure. Finally, she unfolded it, the creases soft beneath her fingertips. His words spilled onto the page like poetry, raw and unguarded. She opens his lips and finished reading. What we shared wasn't just a moment, it was eternity wrapped in a fleeting hour. You've imprinted yourself on my soul, and no matter the distance, I will carry you with me. Until then, carry me with you as I will carry you, always. Eternally yours, perfect stranger, always. Tears blurred her vision, each word carving its way into her heart. She pressed the note to her lips, as if by doing so, she could close the distance between them. The plane's cabin felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the weight of her emotions defied gravity itself. Her chest tightened, a longing so profound it left her breathless. She whispered to herself, a name that now felt like a prayer. Perfect stranger. The luxury train sped toward Tanzania, cutting through the golden savanna under a burning orange sky. Luca sat by the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. The ache of her absence was unbearable, like a wound he couldn't heal. His thoughts were a tangled mess of regret, hope, and the memory of her, the way her laughter had lit up even the darkest corners of his heart, the warmth of her touch, the way she had whispered his name as if it were sacred. He closed his eyes, the rhythmic clatter of the train amplifying the silence within him. She was out there somewhere, carrying a piece of him he could never reclaim. Two souls, bound by a fleeting but eternal connection, traveled in opposite directions, one across the sky, the other across the earth. Yet the threads of fate rarely unravel so easily. Amelia clutched the note tighter, her heart torn between the life waiting for her and the man she'd left behind. Questions swirled in her mind. What if? What now? What could have been? How about the girl? Luca stared out at the fading horizon, his heart heavy but alive with a quiet resolve. He didn't know her name, her destination, or her story, but he knew one thing: he would find her. Somewhere in the vastness of the world, their paths had crossed. Somewhere they would cross again. Amelia stared at the letter in her lap, the words trembling in her hands. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. She hadn't expected honesty. She hadn't expected this. As the plane hummed beneath her and clouds blurred outside the window, she reached for her phone, maybe just to ground herself. A notification blinked across the screen. One new message: Jordan. Baby, you won. I can't live without you. Let's talk. I still love you. She blinked, heart cracking in two directions. One name lit her phone. The other still echoed from the letter. Amelia stepped off the plane into the soft embrace of Washington, D.C.'s spring air. The scent of cherry blossoms floated lightly, like a whispered promise, wrapping around her senses and stirring something gentle inside her. The city glowed in the afternoon sun, petals shimmering pink and white, a delicate celebration of new beginnings. She moved with a lightness in her step, her fingers grazing the worn leather strap of her bag as she reached the carousel. A slow, deep breath filled her lungs, sweet, fresh, alive. Home. Her lips curved into a smile, soft and tentative, as if she was greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Inside the restroom, the cool tile kissed her feet as she washed away the remnants of travel. Water dripped down her face, cool and awakening, mingling with the warmth rising in her cheeks. She carefully applied her favorite rose-colored lipstick, the color blooming like a secret thrill. A touch of blush warmed her skin, and with a shy glance in the mirror, she whispered, "Home, sweet home." But then, just for a heartbeat, Luca's image flickered behind her eyes. His lips, soft and inviting, pressed against hers, sending a shiver that raced through her like a sudden electric current. Her pulse quickened, and she tucked her eyeliner into her bag with a steadying breath. Outside, Houston waited beside the Jeep, his smile wide and genuine, arms open like a safe harbor. He pulled her into a hug so full of warmth, it almost made her forget the ache buried deep inside. Almost. Amelia was an expert at hiding what her heart whispered in silence. She smiled, laughed with Houston, played the part of the happy girlfriend returned home. But inside, her soul was still tangled with the memory of a touch that had left her breathless in the shadow of Victoria Falls, a place where love had roared like thunder and then slipped away. The ride through D.C. was effortless, the streets nearly empty on this gentle Sunday afternoon. The sunlight filtered through budding trees, casting playful shadows on the pavement. They rolled into Yuma Street, turning onto Connecticut Avenue, the familiar corners anchoring her to this moment in time. Before heading inside their apartment, Houston suggested brunch nearby, a quaint spot just steps from the Van Ness station. Though exhaustion weighed heavily on her, Amelia nodded, grateful for the extra minutes to linger outside, to delay the closeness she wasn't ready to face. Over buttery toast and steaming cups of coffee, they shared quiet conversation. The world was calm, but Amelia's heart was a storm of longing and memory, caught somewhere between two continents, two loves. Back at the garage, the Jeep's engine hummed softly as they packed up. Amelia's thoughts drifted like the last petals falling from the cherry trees. Stepping into the shower, the warm water spilled over her skin, soothing the ache in her muscles and soul. Then Houston was there, bare and bold, his presence a tender invitation. His eyes darkened with desire. "Mind if I join?" For a moment she hesitated, then gave in to the pull. His body pressed close, the heat radiating through the spray, his hands tracing promises on her wet skin. As the water cascaded down her back, it carried her away to the misty roar of Victoria Falls, to the phantom touch of Luca's hands. Her breath hitched, a delicious ache blooming deep inside her. Their lips met, hungry and soft, a kiss that spoke of the distance between them and the fire she longed to feel again. Afterward, Houston pulled back with a grin, breath ragged. "Africa gave you something I want to keep. Next trip's on me, you're bringing that magic back." They laughed softly, the sound mingling with the night's quiet, and Amelia let herself drift into sleep, jet lag and longing wrapped tight around her heart. Almost a year had slipped by since Amelia returned from her solo journey through southern Africa, the luxury train that wound from South Africa to Zimbabwe, carrying her through landscapes both wild and breathtaking. That trip hadn't just changed her, it had transformed her, like the gentle erosion of stone by a river, shaping a woman who had finally learned to love herself fiercely, without apology. She had discovered a deep, unyielding courage, the kind that fights for what it believes in, and loves not just others, but the very essence of one's own soul. She had tried to reach Luca in letters, fragile paper bridges thrown across oceans and borders, only to have them come back, stamped "Returned to sender" in cold black ink. Yet, she kept one letter from him, their last tether safe and sacred inside the worn lining of her handbag. It was a talisman on the darkest days, a whispered echo of a love that once promised eternity. Whenever the world pressed heavy on her chest, she would slip her fingers inside her bag, pull out the letter, and lose herself in his words, carried away to a time and place where hearts beat in sync and promises were alive. Houston had noticed, quietly, carefully. He had watched her clutch that letter, eyes shining with tears or distant memories, and though it stirred a wild ache inside him, he said nothing. Because he loved her, because he had betrayed her once, and in the fragile aftermath he had learned the sharpest lesson: silence sometimes shelters love from the wounds of truth. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the kitchen filled with the aroma of shrimp sizzling in butter and garlic, Amelia's phone rang. She called softly to Houston, who was nearby. "Can you bring me my bag?" He obeyed, lifting the worn leather from the chair and crossing the room. As he unzipped the flap, the letter slipped out and fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird. His heart thundered in his chest, a wild, chaotic rhythm like drums beating through an African jungle. His hands trembled. He wanted to look away, to set it down and walk out of the room, but the pull of curiosity and pain was too strong. He bent to retrieve the letter, fingertips grazing the fragile paper. Unfolding it carefully, he began to read. Words meant for another time, another place filled with promises and longing. He could almost see Amelia in his mind's eye, her hands tangled in the hair of another man, their bodies pressed close, breaths mingling in the shadowed quiet. The ache of it clawed through him. When the last line faded, he hesitated. Then, driven by a turmoil he barely understood, he searched further, unzipping the smaller pocket of her bag and pulling out a diary bound in soft leather. With shaking fingers he opened it, eyes scanning the pages dense with secrets, tears dried into the ink, confessions carved in silence. His breath hitched, sweat prickling his brow as if he stood under the midday sun in a desert. He returned to the kitchen doorway, holding the letter and diary like fragile relics. Amelia looked up, startled by his sudden stillness. Their eyes locked, two souls suspended on the edge of a breaking wave, fragile as glass, yet weighted with inevitability. Houston stepped forward, the pain breaking through his carefully guarded walls. Tears brimmed in his eyes, his voice cracked, raw and desperate. "I should ask, but I already know. I read everything, the letter from Luca, the ones you sent back, the diary, the nights you cried for him. So, tell me, was he better than me? Did you ever love me?" Amelia's breath caught, silence swallowing the room. He repeated the question, voice rising in anguish. "Was he better than me?" Tears spilled freely down Amelia's cheeks as she met his gaze. "I don't know how to answer," she whispered. "He was different, special. He touched something inside me, my soul, my heart. I don't know how to explain it." Turning away, she faced the stove where the shrimp began to burn, the scent sharp and bitter, curling into the smoky air. She didn't want to lie, but truth was a blade that cut both ways. Her sobs fractured the stillness. Houston pressed his hands to the counter, struggling to steady himself. "Answer me," he demanded softly. Her voice trembled, barely audible. "Yes, but in a different way. We had something I can't forget. He reached parts of me no one else has." Without another word, Houston grabbed a lighter from the counter and held the flickering flame to the letter. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash, the last physical thread to a love that once held her captive. He turned away, footsteps heavy and silent. Alone, Amelia sank to the floor, tears falling onto the scattered ashes like rain on dry earth. She whispered through broken sobs, "I can't lie to my soul." Driven by a desperate need to reach him, she ran to the garage, heart pounding with every step. The sound of an engine starting made her freeze. Houston's Jeep was pulling out. She stepped into his path, forcing the vehicle to stop. "We need to talk," she said, voice trembling but steady. He climbed out and gathered her into a fierce embrace. "Amelia," he said, voice low and steady as the fading light. "I'm Texan, with pride as wide as the eagle that soars over my land. I'm a southern boy who loves you, maybe still does, but I have to walk away with that pride intact. This is goodbye. Don't call. Don't try to reach me. Let's make it easier for both of us." Amelia pressed her lips to his one last time, soft and trembling, then stepped back to watch him drive away. This was no ordinary departure. This was Houston leaving her life. She stood rooted in the cold night, the scent of burnt shrimp and grit lingering like a bitter memory. Slowly, she turned back to the kitchen, hands trembling as she began to clean the charred remains, each motion a painful rhythm in the silence of a love unraveling. The late afternoon sun draped Milan's streets in a warm, honeyed light as Sophia's apartment at Via della Vita No. 8 came alive with the sounds of family. After moving from their childhood home in Florence, Sophia had settled here, filling the space with laughter and the intoxicating aromas of home cooking. But Florence was still home for Luca, where the siblings had grown up side by side, the cobblestones and narrow alleys holding memories of their youth. Tonight, Milan was their gathering place, a bustling sanctuary where family spilled in through the doors like a rushing river. The kitchen was a fragrant symphony, garlic sizzling in olive oil, fresh basil crushed between fingers, the tang of ripe tomatoes simmering into rich sauce. Freshly baked focaccia sent its warm scent weaving through the air, mingling with the sharp sweetness of red wine in half-full glasses. Baby Adrian, barely 2, was the star of the evening. His chubby hands reached eagerly for handfuls of bread as relatives swooped in to shower him with gifts and kisses. His wide eyes sparkled, reflecting the vibrant chaos around him, laughter, shouts, and the clatter of plates. The room pulsed with 1,000 voices, all speaking at once, blending into a melody of Italian warmth and life. Children darted between legs, elders raised their voices in animated stories, and glasses clinked in joyful toasts. It was the kind of family gathering where time seemed to stretch and fold, caught in endless loops of love and noise. In the midst of it all, Sophia moved with practiced grace, her fiery hair catching the light as she wove between groups. She raised her glass of Chianti, catching Luca's eye across the room. His smile was easy, tinged with the familiar comfort only siblings share. "Cousin," Sophia called out playfully, coming to his side. "I have to brag. There was one time I cock-blocked you. Only once, but it counts." Laughter erupted around them, voices raising in approval and delight. "Tell us!" Maria's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Sophia lowered her voice, the hint of a mischievous secret curling her lips. "Picture this, a luxury train gliding through the wilds from Pretoria to Victoria Falls, the African sun beating down, the landscape a blur of ochre and sky. You remember that trip when we scattered Dad's ashes into the roaring falls?" Nico shook his head with a grin. "That doesn't count. You weren't on vacation." "It was family business," Sophia shrugged with a sly smile. "Maybe, but I swear he was trying. There was this American girl, black, stunning, and I swear I saw his eyes linger on her. I stopped him. I'm proud." Cheers and laughter rose up again, filling the space like fireworks. Maria jumped in, a smirk tugging at her lips. "You know Maria, my best friend? He dumped her, then I dumped her. That man came to Rome, and Lily thought she found a soulmate. Nope, he dumped her. She dumped me. Cheers to that." Glasses clinked, the sound sparkling bright and clear. Sophia raised her glass toward Amelia with playful reverence. "To the woman who has the power to cock-block Mr. Luca. Cheers." The laughter rolled on, a joyful tide that filled every corner. Maria asked about photos from the Victoria Falls trip. "Do you have pictures?" Wait, I'll grab them," Sophia said, disappearing into another room. Luca chuckled, shaking his head. "No way you actually did it. I tapped her, remember?" Sophia spun around, a glint in her eye. "What?" "Yes, I did. Most don't even know how to find her." As Sophia scrolled through the pictures, Luca's eyes caught on one face, Amelia's, just behind the group. A slow smile spread over his lips as he slipped the photo quietly into his hip pocket, careful not to draw attention. "OMG, that's her," Sophia gasped. "We were listening to the train owner before boarding in South Africa." The cousins leaned in, murmuring their approval. "Dude, why do all these women keep chasing you?" someone teased. Luca shrugged with a grin. "Cousin, I'm magical." The laughter swelled again, filling the warm night air. Hours passed with stories, teasing, and songs. The apartment hummed with life, the clinking of glasses, the soft scrape of a guitar in the background, the whisper of old family tales shared in quiet moments. Eventually, the crowd thinned. Guests hugged and kissed their goodbyes, leaving behind the warm glow of shared memories. Luca lingered with Sophia and the birthday girl, the air thick with unspoken understanding. "Sis," Luca said softly, I've got the first train in the morning. I should get some sleep. Sophia gathered her things, her husband holding her hand tenderly as they moved toward the quiet of their room. The door clicked shut behind them, leaving the apartment bathed in soft candlelight and the lingering scent of family, food, and love. Luca stepped quietly into the guest room, the soft click of the door closing behind him muffled by the fading laughter from the evening. His fingers brushed the smooth fabric of his jacket as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph, the one that held Amelia's smile tucked just beneath the surface of his heart. He moved to the window. The vast Milan skyline stretched before him in the fading dusk, rooftops layered like terracotta waves, spires piercing the pink-tinged sky, and lights flickering on, one by one, like distant stars awakening. His lips curved into a gentle smile. Holding the photo close, he pressed a soft kiss to the corner, as if trying to seal a secret promise within its edges. The memory of the train came rushing back, the rhythm of wheels against tracks, the wild African sun casting a golden haze over the plains, the taste of dust and hope mingling on his tongue. He could almost feel the warmth of her hand in his. I left her my address, he murmured to the quiet room, voice low, almost afraid to shatter the moment. I guess she never felt the same. He shed his jacket and shirt, the cool air touching his skin, and moved to the mirror. Brushing his teeth with practiced ease, he caught his own reflection. A face carved by time and experience, dark eyes heavy with dreams, full lips softened by a hint of a smile. Even in the simplicity of underwear and casual motion, Luca carried the effortless grace of a model strutting down the Milan Fashion Week runway. He rinsed and set the toothbrush down, bare feet sliding onto the floor as he made his way to the bed. The crisp linens whispered under him as he settled in, lying back and staring up at the ceiling. Fingers trembling slightly, he pulled the photo close, eyes tracing Amelia's face in the dim light. I don't know what it is, he whispered, voice thick with wonder and longing. But girl, you touched my soul. He smiled softly, clutching a pillow to his chest as if it could hold her warmth. His eyes fluttered closed, and in the quiet of the night, her presence wrapped around him like a gentle breeze. Good night, he breathed. Sweet dreams. And with that, Luca slipped into sleep, carrying her with him into the dark. Tomorrow the train would carry him away again, to Florence, to other days, other duties. But tonight he was home, in the silence, in the memories, in the bittersweet promise of a love still waiting to be written. A few weeks had passed since Luca arrived back in Milan, yet his mind remained tangled in the thought of Amelia. How to reach her, how to bridge the invisible miles that stretched between them. Each day, he wrestled with the quiet storm of hope and hesitation that churned within his chest, a slow fire that refused to die. One evening, as the city lights flickered softly below, Luca stood by the open window of his living room. The cool night breeze slipped in like a whispered secret, carrying with it the distant hum of life flowing through ancient cobblestone streets. Above him, the moon hung low and luminous, its silver fingers gently brushing the weathered stone buildings that had cradled his childhood dreams, his laughter, his heartbreaks. The scent of jasmine from a nearby terrace drifted through the air, mingling with the faint trace of roasting chestnuts from a street vendor far below. Luca closed his eyes for a moment, breathing it all in, the texture of the night, thick with possibility and longing. Turning away from the window, he moved toward his computer desk. From the drawer, he carefully pulled out the photograph, the one that held the echo of her. Though the picture had never been meant to capture Amelia's face, to Luca it was all he saw, her shy smile, the light that danced in her eyes, a spark of something mysterious and unspoken. His fingertips traced the edges as memories spilled forth, vivid and tender. He breathed deeply, the sharp, earthy scent of olive trees from the Tuscan hills flooding his mind, blending with the warmth of Florence's golden sun on his skin. He remembered the laughter echoing through narrow alleys where he and Sophia had grown up, those endless summer afternoons filled with light and life. Beneath it all, distant but never forgotten, was the roar of Victoria Falls, the raw, earthy scent of the African wilderness, the vast wild plains where he had walked beside her, two worlds woven together in the tangled threads of his heart. Luca closed his eyes again, the night air filling his lungs as the ache of what might have been, and what still could be, settled deep inside him, a fragile ache like the flicker of a candle flame, delicate and shimmering in the dark. A small, hopeful smile tugged at his lips. "If I don't try," he whispered to the empty room, "I will regret it forever." With renewed resolve, he pulled out his chair and sat before his computer. His fingers danced across the keyboard as he began to search, each query a tiny step toward a bridge that might reach her. Hundreds of faces appeared on the screen, a sea of strangers, until just as he was about to give up, one photo flickered into view, Amelia's face. His heart clenched and then swelled with tears he did not try to stop. She was there, real, vivid, alive on the screen. He clicked through to her social media, his eyes drinking in the scant traces of her life. A LinkedIn post caught his attention, a congratulatory message for a new position. She was about to begin teaching literature at Howard University in Washington, D.C. He stood up, the room spinning slightly as a laugh escaped him, raw and joyful. "Yes," he said aloud, "yes, I found you." With trembling hands, he sent her a friend request. And now the waiting began. LinkedIn was a labyrinth, a digital jungle thick with guarded doors and silent watchers. Luca sat alone in the dim glow of his apartment, the city's soft murmurs barely reaching his ears. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with a mix of desperation and hope. How could he reach Amelia without overstepping, without breaking the fragile barrier between them? He stared at her profile, her name like a secret carved into his mind, but the coldness of the screen, the impersonal click of keys, felt like miles of distance stretching between them. He wanted to write her, to tell her everything, to bare his soul in words she might never see. Yet respect whispered to him, caution kept his fingers frozen. He tried posting a picture beneath her latest post, an elegant shot of the luxury train they'd ridden, bathed in the golden African sun. But it went unnoticed, swallowed in the silence of her inactivity. Amelia was elusive here, like a ghost drifting through a world that barely knew her. A bitter laugh escaped him, raw and low. "Stupid is as stupid does," he whispered, voice thick with a mix of frustration and fondness. "Maybe I'm about to be the biggest fool of all." The truth burned hot in his chest. If he didn't leap, he would never know. He rose, pacing the room like a caged lion. "Washington, D.C., he murmured, tasting the name on his tongue like forbidden wine. "If I don't find her there, at least I'll have the city to lose myself in." The decision crystallized like a promise, sharp and unyielding.